Church, my name is Michael Rogers. I'm our student pastor, and I'm just thankful to be able to join you this morning. Our pastor has been on vacation for a month, and we're just thankful that he and his family have gotten away. And so I have enjoyed being able to teach through the book of Ruth, and we're going to conclude that today. We have a wedding and a baby today. All right, so join me in Ruth chapter 4. All right, we're not there yet. We've got a hurdle that we have to clear before we can have a wedding and a baby. But today is an awesome day. I'm super excited about teaching through this. Ruth chapter 4. While you're looking that up, let me give you just a little bit of background. If you haven't been with us for the past few weeks, I'll try to quickly run through the book of Ruth. This has been such a great story to teach through. I love it. We have this man named Elimelech who lives in Bethlehem with his family. Bethlehem is under the judgment of God. They're under a famine. Nothing's growing. Everything's falling apart. And so they move 50 miles down the road to Moab to set up shop there. And that's where they live for a while. Moab is not the kind of place where God's people need to be, because this is a pagan people that are involved in all sorts of things. They worship a false god named Chemosh. The way the Moabites got started, by the way, I don't think I've mentioned this, but they all got started when this man named Lot, his two daughters got him drunk, lay with him, and got pregnant by him. And so they began with this incestuous relationship and pretty much always stayed that way, okay? And so, I haven't really talked about that a whole lot because, kids in the room. But kids, you can ask your parents about that. So anyhow, the first time I ever did that, thinking I was so cute and funny, when my own kids were in middle school ministry, they then caught up with me afterwards to ask me, what does it mean that Rahab was a prostitute? Oh, that was funny last year. It's not funny anymore because my kids are here and I can't. Okay, anyway, so we'll talk about Rahab later, though. She makes an appearance here. So Elimelech and his family, they moved to Moab to try to save their life, but sadly they lose their life. Elimelech passes away. His boys grow up. They marry Moabite women, but they pass away as well. And so Naomi, the widow, she is left with her two daughters-in-law. She hears that things are better back home, and so she decides, I'm leaving, I'm moving away, I'm going back home. And so she picks up whatever she's got, and she heads down the road. Her daughters-in-law go to follow her. She pleads with them, stay behind. I have nothing to offer you. You would do better off back with your family and your people. So Orpah, she leaves, she goes back home, but Ruth sticks it out with her. She says, I'm going with you. She has a conversion moment where she says, I'm going, wherever you go, I'm going to go. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. Wherever you live, I will live. And wherever you die, I will die and be buried there. And if anything but death separates you from me, then may God judge me. May God deal with me. And so we understand that in this culture, this is much more than just a relocation. It's not just a move, but family and spirituality were very much tied together. And so she was leaving behind not just her family, but her belief system, her people, her friends, the sights, the sounds, everything, so that she can literally go in a different direction with this new God and with these new people. And so she trusted in the one true God. At that point, she placed her faith in him and in whatever he decided for her life by saying, wherever you go, wherever you die, your people, your God, that's it from this point forward, okay? And so we would say that Ruth had a conversion experience on the way back to Bethlehem. They get home, okay? Everybody hears Naomi's back in town. They're all excited. They show up. They welcome her back, but she says, I'm not Naomi, because Naomi means sweet. I'm not sweet. I'm bitter. Call me Mara. I was full when I left, and now my hands are empty, and I'm broken down, and I'm just really not happy about anything. And whose fault is it? It's God's fault. God has done this to me, okay? She's very upfront and very clear. So in chapter 2, we move on. Ruth decides, well, I've got to figure out how we're going to feed, I've got to feed my mother-in-law. I've got to have a job, but I don't really have any marketable skills. And so there was a system called gleaning that was available to her. Basically, this is at harvest time when they arrive back home. So everything seems bad, but it is harvest time. That is hopeful because stuff's been growing. God has been there. He's been giving rain. And so now they're cutting it down. It's a time filled with hope and celebration. So she can go out in the fields, and if anybody has cut something down, as they're gathering up their grain, their stalks of grain and all that stuff, hey, buddy, he just gave that smile out for free. I didn't even have to work for it. Anyhow, if they drop something on the ground, then somebody could come behind and collect that off the ground. The workers, the harvesters, could not pick that up. That was gleaning. That was put in place for somebody. It was not a glamorous thing, but it was something that somebody who was poor or traveling through, a foreigner, or just somebody who's down and out, they could still provide for themselves if they would work for it. And so she goes out there, she asks her mother-in-law, hey, I don't really have any other options except gleaning. Can I go glean? And her mother-in-law says, sure, go ahead. So she goes out, and the Bible says she just so happens to find herself in the field of a man named Boaz. And so we see God's sovereign hand directing her and leading her to this guy that will take care of her. Boaz, he comes rolling up, he looks out at his fields, and he says, who is that lady over there? And Johnny Clipboard comes over, Brian Spicer, church administrator, says, well, I've been keeping good notes. Here's my spreadsheet on this. And that is Ruth. She came back with Naomi from Moab, and she's been out here working hard. She asked permission. She's just been doing her job. And so Boaz goes up to her and says, hey, I'm so glad you're here. I've heard about you. Word has spread of the things that you have done for your mother-in-law. So stay here. This whole field, this is mine, and I don't want you to go anywhere else. You keep coming back here every day because you'll be safe. I'll watch after you. Like he says, stick with my servant girls, which means she's got friendship all of a sudden. You're new in a new town. You want friends. You want people that are safe. And so Boaz is watching out for her. He says, come eat lunch with us, have something to drink with us. My servants have drawn water out of the well, and I want you to be provided for and taken care of. Not only does he give her a safe place to work and to spend her time, but he also sends her home with a lot of grain. Okay, he gives her a bunch of grain and says, hey, bring this home to your mother-in-law. Bring this home to Naomi, okay? And so she gets home, and her mother-in-law is like, oh my gosh, how in the world did you get this much stuff? What have you been doing? And she says, no, I've been with this guy named Boaz. I've been working in his field, and everything comes together for Naomi at that point. She says, oh my word, he is one of our redeemers. He is a relative, a close relative of ours. And so this is good. God has shown favor. Keep going back to his field. So she keeps going back, but that's all we hear at that point. They have lunch together, but there's no second date. He doesn't call her back. He doesn't text her, nothing. It's just it's all silent for a while during the rest of harvest, which could have been several more weeks, even up to a month or two, okay? But when harvest is finally over with, Naomi says, we've got to do something because he hasn't called. He appears to be a little slow on the uptake. He doesn't know how to make the second move, so we're going to get in his way, okay? And she gives Ruth in chapter 3 very risky advice that I would not ever give to my daughters. And by the grace of God, God willing, nobody will ever have to give this advice to my daughters, because something we talked about last week was this, is that, one thing that parents can do for their children is to help guard and guide and protect your children and lead them in a way that is safe and in all of their pursuits, whether it's academic or socially or in relationships at some point in time. And so I intend to be very involved in my children's relationship, not because I want to tell them who to date or what to do or anything like that, but because I want to help guard and guide their hearts and protect them and help them to make wise choices. Okay, and so that's something that I look forward to having the opportunity to do. Thankfully, right now, my oldest daughter is more in love with her horse than anything and doesn't even care about boys, and that's just awesome. All right, so I will keep feeding that horse as long as it takes, So anyhow, my next daughter, she's a little more interested in love. So that's anyway, we'll figure that out when we get to it. We're working on it. All right, so anyhow, she gives Ruth this very risky advice and says, hey, I don't want you to go chase him, but I want you to get in his way. All right, so she goes out to the threshing floor, which we talked about is a little bit like, it's redneck party out in the woods. They've collected all their grain, then they set this big bonfire, and then they eat and drink and fall asleep, okay, out there at the foot of their grain pile. She says, hey, I want you to go watch, see where Boaz falls asleep, and then go uncover his feet, all right, so that he'll wake up in the middle of the night. That's not what she says, but that's what we're saying, because we are reading between the lines and seeing that Naomi is not leading her to go be unvirtuous in any manner. She's just saying, hey, you got to go out there and get in his way and wake him up so his feet are uncovered, he catches the draft, and then he wakes up, and like any parent that's ever had their child wake them up just by standing in front of their face as they're asleep on the couch, taking a nap, it's all innocent, and then you realize, I'm not alone. Oh, that's what he does. Boaz, he opens his eyes, he wakes up, he's like, I'm not alone, oh my gracious. Well, who are you? He's concerned because sometimes there were, shall we call them, ladies of the night that might frequent these types of establishments or these places. He's like, I'm not one of your customers. I don't want anything. But she says, no, I'm Ruth. And this is where she breaks from her mother-in-law's advice. Naomi says, go uncover his feet. He'll wake up. He'll tell you what to do. I bet he will, Naomi. Awesome advice. All right. But Ruth breaks from this advice. He opens his eyes. He wakes up. Hey, who is this? I'm Naomi. But then she speaks up. And so she brings about some clear communication here, makes her intentions known by saying, I need you to redeem me. I need you to spread your wing over me, or some of your translations of Scripture may say, put your blanket or your cloak over me. All the same picture in that when somebody would get engaged back in this point in time, the man would literally put a blanket or a cloak or a family heirloom, a shawl, something like that. Any of you guys have any shawls laying around? So put that over the shoulders of his intended to symbolize, I want to protect you. I want to comfort you. I want to provide for you and bring you under my wing, so to speak. Okay, and so that's what she asked him to do. So she's not proposing to him, but she's proposing that he propose to her. Basically, she's proposing to him. Okay, makes her intentions clear. All right. So after this, the way Boaz responds in chapter 3 shows us, man, his heart is in this. He is pumped. He's so excited. This is not just an obligation that he is fulfilling to Ruth, but rather we see this excitement on his behalf. He's like, man, this kindness that you first extended to your mother-in-law, now you're extending it to me by asking me, giving me the honor to step in and fill this role in your life. You could have gone after guys that were younger and better looking or whatever, because you're younger. Apparently he's an older guy, you know. But you've offered this to me and asked me to fill this role for you. This kindness is just overwhelming, and he is obviously just over the moon. He is in love. This isn't just something where where he feels like he has to do this because no one else will step up. But he's just been a little slow to make the move. But once he realizes he's got a shot, man, he takes it and he goes for it, and it's awesome. Okay, but we find out there's a hurdle to be crossed. We talked about this last week. Every good love story has some kind of hurdle, some kind of something that has to be worked through. I promise you we're going to get to Ruth chapter 4. We're going to get to the gospel in a minute, but this intro stuff is important, okay? So every good love story has something that has to be worked through, to see it all come to fruition, to see it happen. I mean, if a love story or movie didn't involve some kind of drama, then we'd be like, oh, well, they just fell in love. Awesome, But we like a little tension in our stories, right? And we see some tension here. There's something that's got to take place. There is a redeemer that is closer in line than Boaz that has the right to redeem Ruth and Naomi and their property and everything else, okay? All right, so he's got to figure this out. But like any good man, if there's a problem, he's going to figure it out, okay? He's not sitting here thinking, oh, wow, I really like this girl. Maybe we'll date for a few years and see if it's right. And then we'll get engaged, and we'll just be engaged for like 5 or 6 years. No, ladies, if that's his plan, he is not our Boaz, okay? And you need to break up with him. And if you struggle with that, I'll break up with him for you. Glad to do it. It's one of my services that I offer as youth pastor, okay? I've done it before, all right? I have experience breaking up with other people. For example, let me tell you a little bit more. I started telling you some of my story with my wife last week, okay? Our story is unique, just like everybody's story is, but I love our story. My wife and I love our story. There's a lot of things that I've gotten wrong in my life, and this is one thing I really felt like I did well. I did really, really well with. And one of the obstacles that I had to wait out when it came to my wife and I was another guy, okay? Had to wait this guy out. See, as our circles of friends started closing, and as I started hanging out with her a little bit more often, I just saw, man, this is just a really remarkable young lady. I mean, I was just really taken by her character and her nature and her modesty and how much she loved Jesus. I mean, I was just really blown away just by how incredible she was. And of course, she had this other guy hanging around like a fly or something, just buzzing around. But that didn't matter to me because I had no thoughts beyond just, this is a really good friendship in my life. This is solid, and I'm thankful to have this friend in my life, And that was all there was to it. That's all that mattered to me. But that all started to change, David, when this guy flying around, made her cry a couple of times in my presence, all right? We're all hanging out as friends, and this dude did things, and she cried. And if you know my wife can cry like, it's like a spiritual gift of hers, okay? She can continue in a conversation, not even slow down, not even break stride, and these big, beautiful tears will just well up and come cascading down her cheeks and dropping into a pool on the floor. And you'll never, if you're on the phone with her, you'll never even know it, okay? Me, crying is a full body experience, okay? It's like everything contorts, but she could just power right through it. And it was just, man, it was hot. It was such a turn on to me, okay, that she could do that. But it did something like primal down inside of me that I'm like, you disrespected this person that I think is just amazing as just a human being. And that made me want to do something, okay, to step, all right, but I didn't, okay, because, respect and boundaries and everything, all right. I told you last week that my daughter, Hannah, the second daughter, the one that's more interested in romance, she asked me, tell me your love story. Gladly, all right, I'll tell anybody the story anytime. So I'm telling her this story and everything, and this is a part of the story that I had to wait this guy out, and I continued to become more, better and better friends with your mom, and then we went away for Thanksgiving break, okay? College is off, we're home for Thanksgiving, and then we come back. I hadn't seen her for a week or two. We come back to school, and it just so happened, okay, that I'm in line next to her at Subway. We had a Subway on campus. That's where we got our dinner and everything. And just so happened, maybe I watched her walk up and then hurried up, and pushed the guy out of the way so I could, anyway. So I get next to her in line. I'm like, hey, Audrey, how you doing? Hey, how's Thanksgiving? Great, and everything. All right, so we're just kind of catching up and everything. She says, well, there was something that happened. I broke up with what's his name? Y'all, I literally had to turn my face away so she would not see me burst into this huge smile. I had to physically turn away because I was like, I'm going to ruin it right here. I'm so sorry, and so I played it cool, right? Me, I'm super cool. So I just kind of, I just continued the way I was. I'm like, okay, I have an opportunity, but again, like I said last week, and I say this over and over, her friendship meant more to me than any chance at a relationship. And so I prayed against that, and I tried to leave my heart out of it because I knew that I would mess it up, and I wanted her as a friend in my life. She was just such an incredible, remarkable person. I just wanted to be her friend, okay? And then, things just started, as they do, they started to progress. But this guy, he still kept flying around like a fly on a dung heap. He just kept buzzing around in and out of the picture, okay? And one day, I saw this dude disrespect her again, one more time. And I was like, oh, it's on. Enough's enough, okay? So I went to his dorm room. I'm a resident director. I have a job on the campus, okay? So I have an image to portray, and being physically imposing and threatening to the residents is not, it's kind of frowned upon, right? But I go and knock, he goes, hey, Michael. It's like, listen to me. You and Audra are done. You hear me? He kind of backs up. I said, it's over. You will not call her. You will not speak with her. If she comes walking down the sidewalk, you will turn and go the other direction. You're not going to apologize for being a jerk. You're not going to try to make things right. You will never speak to her again. Are we clear? He says, yes, sir. And that's the last time we've ever spoken. So she broke up with him the first time. I broke up the second time. I have experience. I'm willing to help. All right, so anyway. That's a lot of things to say, but it's an important part because it helps us to see that Boaz was willing to get the job done, okay? There's a hurdle, and a man who is on a mission will not drag his feet, okay? He's not going to drag his feet. And so when she goes home that night or early the next morning, and she tells Naomi everything that has happened, Naomi's like, oh, what happened? Well, wouldn't you like to know, Naomi? Hopefully you've been up pacing the floor all night after this really bad advice you've given. Again, anyway. Ruth tells everything that's happened, and Naomi says, he will not rest until the matter is handled. He is going to take action immediately. And that is where we pick up chapter 4. Wow, that was a long introduction. Totally worth our time. You're welcome. All right. You ready for this? I'm ready for this. I'm so ready for this. Love it. All right. Chapter 4, verse 1. Verse 1, Ken, you ready? All right. I'm not always easy to follow on the screen, so I'm trying to help him out. Here we go. Now Boaz had gone up to the gate and sat down there, and behold, the Redeemer of whom Boaz had spoken came by. So Boaz said, "Turn aside, friend, sit down here." And he turned aside and he sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, "Sit down here." So they sat down. And then he said to the Redeemer, "Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me, that I may know, for there is no one besides you to redeem it, and I come after you." And he said, "I will redeem it." Pause. Boaz, what have you done? You just wrecked it all. I imagine if Naomi's in the crowd. I don't know if Naomi's there watching this, but if Naomi's in the crowd, she's like, "I was sweet, then I was bitter, and now I'm just furious," you know? You ever encountered a furious mother-in-law? Whew. I have not, because, good relationship. But I mean, this just seems bad. He just laid it out there, and the guy says, "Yeah, I'll redeem it." Cool, done deal, okay? But not so fast, okay? First of all, let me back up in just a moment and say this, point out a few things. First of all, Boaz, obviously, we've talked about him being a worthy man, a man of respect that people pay attention to, and this is evident by the fact that when this guy, Mr. What's-his-name, we're going to call him, because he's not given a name, that's intentional, but we'll talk about that in a second, but when Mr. What's-his-name walks up, Boaz says, "Hey, I need you to sit down." And the guy just sits down. And then 10 elders walk up. These are important dudes that have stuff going on. He says, "Hey, I need you to sit down over here." And what do? All right, Boaz said, "Sit. I'm going to sit down." Because Boaz is a guy that when he asks for something or he instructs something, people obviously pay attention. He's not a guy that wastes their time. They're not used to Boaz wasting their time. Boaz, he's got only important things going on. So guys, don't waste other people's time. Nobody wants that, okay? But Boaz says, "Hey, I need you to have a seat." And they say, "Cool, I'm going to have a seat." All right, so they sit down. And he lays it out there. Here's this. You going to redeem it? The guy says, "Yeah, totally, I'm in." All right? And we think it's ruined. But what we find out is Boaz has not ruined anything. He's just setting the table. He's a shrewd negotiator. He is really good at this. If you go buy a used car from Boaz, he will get the best price for his wares. Okay, so Boaz he says, "Oh, but wait, there's one other thing that I haven't mentioned." Okay, on the day, sorry Ken, verse 5. Boom, he's on it. Then Boaz said, "The day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you also acquire Ruth, the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetrate the name of the dead in his inheritance." Then the Redeemer said, "I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption for yourself, for I cannot redeem it." We see what Boaz was about. He was just setting the table. He's just setting the stage. He's drawing him in. But wait, there's this other big thing involved. And see, as we've talked about, the whole job of the Redeemer was to come in behind somebody who had passed away, if there are no other relatives or anybody, and you are to marry the widow and have babies. Not for your sake, but for the sake of the dead person, for the sake of the deceased, so that their name and their legacy and their heritage can continue and not be wiped out from the face of the earth. That's why this system was put into place. That's why this was all set up and why it's so important that there needs to be a redeemer in place. And so this guy, he's like, buy land? Absolutely. Obviously, he's got the means to do it, and he's ready to go. Yeah, I would love to have another piece of land that I can farm and that I can pass on to my own children and make some money off of. Yeah, this is a good financial situation for me. I'm in. Oh, but wait, you're not actually buying it for yourself. You're buying it for this widow and for the children that you're going to have for her. Oh, wait, I'm totally out. Okay? And that's why we see for Boaz, again, this is about more than just an obligation or an opportunity. Because the money that he has to spend money, he has to buy this land, but it doesn't belong to him. This is like, hey, I need you to go buy this house over there. Awesome, I can afford that. Oh, but you'll never live in it, and you'll pass it on to somebody that you've never even met before, and it'll never have any kickback or any benefit for you. That's what we're looking at here. Go buy this land for somebody else. So the other redeemer, not interested. Take care of my relative that needs help? Nope, not having it. It's going to mess up my own inheritance. I've got kids. I've got a wife. I've got other things going on that, I don't need my property split up, and I don't need to focus any energy or finances towards this person that needs help. Or no, it's a good cause, but no, I'm out. But Boaz says, spend money on somebody that I love, even though I have nothing that I'll get back from that. There's no return for me. Done. I'm in. Boaz is all in. He is totally in because he loves Ruth and loves the opportunity that he has to provide for her, to protect her, to take care of her, and the mother-in-law. Guys, again, you better date your mother-in-law, okay? All right, so verse 7, this is weird and interesting. Now, this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging. To confirm a transaction, the one drew off his sandal and gave it to the other. And this was the manner of attesting in Israel. I'm sorry, it's just humorous. All right, so this was the manner of attesting in Israel. So they, verse 8. So when the Redeemer said to Boaz, buy it for yourself, he drew off his sandal. Boom. I mean, I think we should bring this back, right? Hey, you want to buy this car? I lost the title. It's cool. Just give me your flip-flop. I mean, have anybody ever bought or sold a house? The signature's required. It's just like, you better be ambidextrous so you can swap in and out. Why can't we just use a stamp, It's almost as bad as new patient intake forms at a new doctor. It's like, I just gave you this information on the page before. Why do you need it again? Oh, but if you write that, I'm the bad guy. You don't want to, So if Amazon, all I'm saying is this, if Amazon can figure out one-click purchasing, why can't they figure out one-click mortgages or something like that? Should be easier. Hey, give me your flip-flop. Cool. They swap sandals, and the deal is done. It's done. He is, but now, this is where we get to celebrate. This is where we start to see, just some awesome, the hurdle has been crossed. They have passed over this barrier. The guy, Mr. What's his name again? Why do I call him Mr. What's his name? Because in a book that is filled with sentiment and meaning, and every person's name is listed, and all of their names have these incredible meanings. Elimelech, my God is king, but he kind of failed in that. Mahlon and Chilion, sickly and dying, like COVID and Rona. We got Naomi, sweetheart, but she becomes Mara, bitter. Ruth, her name means companion or friend. Boaz, his name means pillar of strength. But then we have this guy who is a very important part of the story. It all pivots right here. He's got a major role to play because he's what brings the drama in. It could fall apart based on this guy, but we don't have his name. It is completely left out, and I think on purpose, because this guy isn't worth it. He's not worth hearing about because he said, have a chance to take care of my family? Yeah, no, I'm out. Not interested. Costs too much money. If you know anything about kids are a blessing. They cost so much money. They are so expensive. Y'all are worth it. You're beautiful children, but it's a lot. So he's not into it. He's not interested in that. He's not really ready or willing or interested in being a redeemer because it might cost him. But we know that being a redeemer, the cost is just, it's priceless. It costs, what does it cost? It actually costs everything. But if there is love involved, then the motivation trumps it all, and it is worth it. And Boaz says, I would give everything for her. I would do everything for her because I love her. And then he gathers, so then he's already got people gathered around, but this is his chance to really take a stand and to really make a declaration. Ladies, marry a guy that'll make a declaration over you. Listen to what he says. He says, you're witnesses. Verse 9, Boaz said to the elders and all the people, you are witnesses this day that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Chilion and Mahlon. Okay, there's some technicalities. Let's get that out of the way. And also Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon, I have bought to be my wife. It's just verbiage, okay? He doesn't own her, all right? To perpetuate the name of the dead and his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brothers and from the gate of his native place. You are witnesses to this day. He says this over all the people. But then listen to the way they respond to him. They are just as into this moment because for them, this is not just a transaction. We see that there is It's like they've all been waiting for this moment. Listen to how they respond. Verse 11, then all the people who were at the gate and the elders said, we are witnesses. Okay? Yeah, the deal is it's done. But listen to what they say. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. 12 sons, 12 tribes. I'm not saying that, you need to have people around you that say, hey, maybe you'll have a dozen babies, but sometimes it happens. So, all right, so moving on. They say, I'm sorry, I lost my place. May you act worthily in Ephrathah and be renowned in Bethlehem, and may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring that the Lord will give you by this young woman. Now, that's an interesting story in and of itself that I'm not going to get into, but the people that they've chosen to bring into this, like they had a bumpy start too. It's kind of it's not the perfect and ideal storybook situation, the people that they were called back to, but they say, but God used them, okay, and may God do the same thing in your life. And the people that are gathered around, the elders of the community, and those that were just walking by that stopped to see what was happening, this is the response that they have. This is not just okay, the deal is done, we've witnessed it, you've exchanged sandals, okay, hang on to that sandal in case you ever, all right, but we're good now. But then they go so much further, and they're like, but may God bless you. May he keep you. May he expand your house. May he multiply your house. May all these things happen. And they bring their family into it. They bring their heritage and their lineage into it. And if you know anything about the Hebrew people, like they are super, super protective and proud over where they came from and who they came from. And if they are willing to liken a Moabite, Ruth, if they're willing to liken her unto one of their ancestral mothers, like that is a huge deal. They recognize that God is involved in this and God has done something beautiful and amazing, and they affirm it, okay? Listen to me, young people, single people, old people, whatever. You need to have people in your lives, okay? You need to have people that are gathered around you, like these elders and like the crowd, like the people, like the family that are gathered around. You need to have people in your lives that can gather around you, whether it's a parent, you need to have your parents, small group leader or a friend or a pastor or just, you need to have people in your life who are wise, perhaps a bit older, a little more experienced, that can speak truth into your life and can affirm the things that they see God doing in your life. These people gather around and they affirm it. They don't gather around and say, this all makes sense on paper, but I see some red flags. They don't do any of that, okay? If you have people in your life that are gathered around and looking at your relationships or your job choices or your big decisions, and they're thinking, I don't know, if they don't respond in this kind of way, then listen to what they have to say, because God may be speaking through them. He does that often, uses the people around us to just add to our experiences and the communal wisdom that is gathered around. So listen to the people around you. But if they affirm you in this way, like green light, go for it. You are good to go. In my story, my wife and I, we had lots of people around us. We did not go through this alone, okay? There were lots of people around us. There's several of the hurdles and the things that I had to walk through to win her heart. The guy, that's whatever. That's over and done with. Mr. What's his name? All right, but there were two other big things that I had to just really, not a hurdle to be jumped over, but a doorway that I knew I had to pass through to be able to win her affection. The first was just the pursuit of her heart, because I mentioned this before, but Audrey didn't chase anyone. And she made it very clear, I don't need any man because I have Jesus and my daddy. And she really meant it. And I was like, cool, but I still want to be your friend. So how do we, And so I was very intentional in pursuing her, okay? Everything that I could possibly do, not to change myself. I wanted to be, who I was. I wasn't trying to present a false picture, but, this was the time where I used every chance to pursue her heart and make sure she knew that I was a guy who loved Jesus, a guy who would work hard, who knew how to read, who knew how to hold doors, the whole everything, okay? I was super intentional because I knew, I always knew. I was very self-aware. I knew Audrey's way out of my league. I shouldn't even have any chance with her, and for some reason, she's given me one. So, I never relaxed in my pursuit of my wife. I'm not saying I was a stalker, not like that kind of pursuing, all right? But just, very, very intentional to pursue her heart and to guard it and protect it along the journey. And the second big doorway, I mentioned this last week, but just knowing how important her family was to her and how intentional they were, her mom and dad, in guiding and guarding her heart, I knew if I don't win the parents over, if I don't have their blessing, then I don't need to be involved in this. They were the elders and the people gathered around. Not only that, they literally had other friends and other people gathered around them praying over the decision as to whether or not they were going to grant their blessing to this dude that they didn't, know very well whether I could pursue their daughter or not. There were lots of village elders, not village idiots, village elders gathered around that and it wasn't an obstacle. It was just a doorway. It was something I knew, man, like there are so many people that love this girl, and I want that in my life. I want them to be a part of this, not to take her away from this. I've got to go through this door, all right? And I was willing to do that, and it was totally worth it. And I have come to see and know and value community and having elders in my life, having people in my life that can help guard, guide, protect, instruct all along the way. And that hasn't ended at all. That's not ended a bit. I can go on and on about the people in my life that have been there for many years and continue to be. So, all right. So now, we've gotten past that, right? We ready? Verse 13. Dearly beloved, we have gathered here this day in the presence of God and these witnesses present to witness the marriage between Ruth the Moabite and Boaz, the man among men. Love it. It says in verse 13, so Boaz took Ruth. They got married. She became his wife. And he went into her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. Then the women said to Naomi, blessed be the Lord who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him. Then Naomi took the child and laid him on her lap and became his nurse. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, a son has been born to Naomi. They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now that is a bit of an odd tradition that I'm not interested in bringing back. The ladies of the neighborhood gathering around and naming your firstborn, not interested in that. But they did pick a good name, okay? They picked an excellent name. Obed, it means worshiper. It means one who worships or a faithful servant. It is like, it's brought, full body, whoo, give me a second. This baby has done something for Naomi that has brought her back to a place where she is fully engaged with God the Father again. And I know that, we may want to say, well, that should just be between us and God. But God uses so many things to draw us to himself, and sometimes it's a baby. When my wife and I, early on in our marriage, things were a bit rocky with my parents. Loved my parents, they loved the Lord, but just it was just some things we had to work through, and it wasn't always easy. And I remember very vividly holding my son and thinking to him, you will do things and open doors that we have been unsuccessful at doing and opening. And sure enough, that baby changed things for my mom. And things and now, you would never know that we started the way we did 18 years ago to look at us now. Because babies are awesome. They do things, all right? They open doors. They're amazing, all right? So these women, they gather around, and they're calling her Naomi again. And notice she doesn't correct them this time. Last time when we saw this, the end of chapter 1, they're like, Naomi's back. She's like, I'm not sweet. I'm not Naomi. You call me bitter. But she doesn't correct them this time, because the sweetness has returned and her heart is full once again. She said in chapter 1, I left full and now I come back empty-handed, and now her hands are literally filled with a baby. I mean, it's just beautiful. So I want to point out some things about Naomi that we see, okay? Because she, for me, she's she's just one of the biggest parts in all of this because she's been engaged in the story the longest. We meet her in chapter 1 in the beginning, and now here she is at the very end. And it's not to say that Ruth is backed out of the picture, but just I want to focus on Naomi for just a moment because there are some really key things that we see in regards to just what God has done for her, but also in what we learn about how God redeems you and I and what he does for us in the process of redemption. First, we see that Naomi has gone from experiencing death to experiencing life. She experienced death by way of her husband and her 2 sons passing away. Now, I know I've enjoyed making fun of Elimelech and kind of putting him down, right? Probably not very generous on my part, but the fact is, this is still her husband. This is the love of her life. This is the man that she adores, and he's passed away. And not only that, then she loses her children. I mean, I just can't even imagine the grief and the weight of losing everybody, and she just feels dead inside. But now here at the end, she is experiencing not only new life by way of a baby, but perhaps some life coming back into her heart as well. And we see that this applies to us because Scripture says that you and I are dead in our sins. When we don't know Jesus and have not been redeemed and experienced his redemption, we are dead in our sins. And there's just emptiness and decay, and there's nothing alive, all right? But through Jesus, when he redeems us, he takes out our heart of stone, Isaiah says, and gives us a heart of flesh that beats for him. He brings us from death to life. He brings us from emptiness to fullness. Mara comes back into Bethlehem. She says, I'm empty, and God has done this to me. But now she's full. And who has done this to her? It's God. God has brought her from emptiness to fullness. And sometimes we experience that as well. You may have gone through a very empty period of your life, just a time of feeling like you have just been broken and everything has spilled out. You may be in that time right now. I know I have certainly been in those moments where I just think, man, there's just nothing left. I've got nothing, I'm just empty. I'm just hollow. I'm just a shell of a person. I've been through those times in my life. And you know what God has done? God has filled me up. And what I've seen is that God is, just like he was with Naomi, God's been writing a story in my life, and I just have to kind of wait it out and see where it's going. Naomi had to wait this thing out, but she wouldn't, now she's full. And that's not to say that we should enjoy the hardship, because the hardship is never fun. It's not something I look back on and think, man, I'm so glad that God let me get hit by that truck. That was awesome. No, it's not. It's always bad, okay? But the things that sometimes come from our hardship, a lot of times, we look back and realize that was when God was growing me the most. I look back over my 10 years that we lived here in Crestview and been here at Emmanuel. We're just very different than we were 10 years ago. So much has changed. And I often look back and I say that I wish the lessons would have been easier. There's no doubt about that. There's just been times where I feel like God has just crushed me time and again, where I've just been so broken. And I wish it wasn't that hard. But I'm thankful for the man that I have become and am becoming because of what God is doing, okay? And so going from that emptiness to fullness, it's a tough journey, but God is doing something. And just like with Naomi, sometimes the thing that God is doing, and this is tough, but for her, it played out to where we see she experiences fullness, but sometimes the thing that God is doing, we find out it's really not even about us. Or maybe we don't find that out at all. There was a bump in the road. I don't know what that was all about. There was this pitfall that I fell in. I don't know what that was about. Never got an explanation for that. I just had to keep walking. Sometimes the thing that God is doing, it's not even about us, and we don't know how it's working out, but trust that God is writing a story that we can't see. And God brings all these things together for our good and for his glory, whether we see it or realize it or not. Naomi has gone from cursed to feeling blessed. In this culture, not having an heir was like one of the greatest curses that they felt like personally that God would visit upon them, whether they couldn't have children of their own or whether their children had passed away and they had no heir, nobody to carry on their name. That means that when they die, there's no family that will remember them. They are forgotten and it's over with. I mean, that's a sad, you can see why that would be considered a curse in their society. And so she goes from feeling like, I'm cursed, it's over. There's nobody that will remember me, there's nobody that can carry this on. To now, she is blessed, again, because she has an heir. She has this baby in her hand. But not only that, you and I know the story. She doesn't know how this is going to play out. But you and I know, down in verse 18, it says, now these are the generations of Perez. Perez fathered Hezron. Hezron fathered Ram. Ram fathered Amminadab. Amminadab fathered Nahshon. Nahshon fathered Salmon. Salmon fathered Boaz. Boaz fathered Obed. Obed fathered Jesse. And Jesse fathered David. King David, the greatest king in their history, Naomi gets to be great-great-grandmother of. Ruth gets to be great-grandmother of the greatest king in all of Israel. And then if you flip to Matthew chapter 1, you can read how that continues right on to where they get grafted in and brought into the lineage of Jesus Christ himself. God is writing a story that they would never see completed, but we get to see and we get to learn for our own benefit and understand that, sometimes it's just worth continuing to walk. Keep putting that one foot in front of the next, and just keep moving forward and keep walking and keep trusting that even if I don't know what God is doing, he is writing this grand and beautiful story. And in this case, it was all about the redemption of God's people to himself. And he used a pagan lady like Ruth. He used a brokenhearted, bitter woman like Naomi. Boaz, I had mentioned earlier, but Boaz, it's kind of like briefly glanced over here, but Boaz, do you know who his mom was? Rahab, the prostitute that didn't even belong to the people of God. She was in Jericho when the people of God came through, and she helped save those spies that were hiding out in her place. And God saved Rahab and her family through that moment. She becomes one of the people of God, becomes the mother of Boaz. And so we see all these people getting grafted in and brought in and adopted in and combined into God's family, leading up eventually to the greatest king of Israel, but also to the king of all kings, Jesus Christ himself. We could never write that story. We would never know that this was coming. We would never know to expect that. And that's good for us to see that because it helps us to see, man, I don't know what God is doing right now. I'm empty. I'm broken. I'm bitter. Things have fallen apart. But I don't know. Maybe just keep walking and keep trusting because God may continue to do what God always does. And he may be right. You may get to see something happen. But even if you don't, God is writing a story, and he's bringing you, just like Naomi, he's bringing you from despair to hope. You may not experience it now, but because of the redemption of God through Jesus Christ, because we see Boaz playing this role, humanly speaking, in the life of Ruth and Naomi, but Jesus has done that in our lives, spiritually speaking. He has redeemed us, brought us from death to life, from a hopeless situation to being filled with hope, to being full, happy, and blessed and full of life. That is what Jesus does. When we reach out to him and ask him, just like Ruth did, ask him, hey, I need you to spread your wing over me. Like my life is kind of falling apart. Nothing is making sense. Everything I try to chase after is just leading to brokenness. I need for you to be my redeemer. This is about more than just your job opportunities. This is about more than just your financial stability. It's about more than just the way you're trying to raise your family. I'm talking now about just your very soul. We are separated from God, but God wants to redeem us and bring us into his family. And just like Boaz did for Ruth and Naomi, Jesus Christ does for us. Ruth reached out to Boaz. We reach out to Jesus, and he does all of the work. He does all the work. He is willing and excited and delighted to bring us into his family through redemption. We just reach out and ask him to do it, and he does it. So if you have never considered the role of Jesus in your life, and if you've never trusted in him, why wouldn't you do that right now? I invite you and encourage you to do that right now. Just in your heart, reach out to God and say, I need for you to redeem me. I need you to bring me into your family. I need you to protect me and provide for me because this just isn't working out. And I am at odds with you, but I want to be connected with you. And you know what he does? He does it. He does it. He is delighted to bring his children into his fold. Let me pray for you. God, we thank you so much for our time that we have spent in this beautiful piece of literature. So grateful for the book of Ruth that just highlights the overall theme of redemption that we see throughout all of Scripture. And God, as we get to see it played out in a love story, I pray that we might just notice different elements of your character throughout this story and see that you are working in the same way, that we are hopeless, that we are without any opportunity, but you saw us in that state when we had nothing to offer, and you bring us into your family through Jesus Christ. And so, God, I pray that you would help us to trust in him. For those that have never asked him for redemption and for care and for love, I pray that they might do that right now. For those of us that have, just like going to a wedding causes us to love those to whom we've made commitments just that much more, God, I pray that this story might encourage us to just be renewed in our commitment to you, that we might desire you more deeply so that people can know that you are good and your ways can be trusted by the relationship that we have with you and with others. God, I pray that during this time, Father, as we just sing this song, as we spend time in reflection, Lord, that you would just speak to our hearts and draw us to yourself. In Jesus' name, amen.